And we are live.
And welcome into Gator Bytes on the 1010XL.com podcast network, also being simulcast on the Florida Gator 1010XL Facebook page. Today's Gator podcast is brought to you by Southeast Orthopedic Specialists, Northeast Florida's leading orthopedic center, providing an unparalleled level of care across numerous locations in both Jacksonville and St. Augustine. That includes Riverside, Northside, the South Side, the beaches, Swimming Island, and St. John's. He is Graham Marsh. I'm the hacker Ryan Green. You, presumably, are Florida Gator fans. That's why you're watching and listening. And there is quite a bit of news going on with Gator athletics. A bowl game to talk about, a top 10 college basketball team to talk about, the transfer portal or lack thereof to talk about. But Graham, first and foremost, we're recording this on Thursday morning, December the 19th, and the big news that came out within the last hour rewinds the clock back about 2 weeks ago. The devastation among Gator recruiting fans when five-star Dallas Wilson out of Tampa chose Oregon over Florida. He'd been committed to Oregon for like 700 days. All of a sudden, we wake up this morning. Dallas Wilson might be a Florida Gator in the next week or two. Apparently, he is asked out of his letter of intent with Oregon, and he is planning on coming to Florida. Now, this recruitment has been wild. It's been crazy. I'm not going to count anything before it's done, but quite a story to wake up to if you're a Gator recruiting fan.
Correct. And, obviously most of us believed that after a lot of that back and forth and, the night before signing day eve, if you will, I think a lot of Gators believed that he'd be a big domino to fall in the Gators' way um, on signing day morning. And then obviously that's not how it turned out, and Gator fans were upset about that. Um, that said, Hack, with this happening and this kind of late in the game backing out of his letter of intent and all that, I have to believe, Hack, correct me if you believe differently. Do you know who is his agent representation for NIL?
I do not.
It is Vernell Brown.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Now that you say that, yeah, I do remember reading that.
That can't be a coincidence, right?
No,
You,
no. Of
you
course,
have
Vernell
to
Brown's
imagine
son.
if his NIL representation is through some third party that doesn't care about the Florida Gators, you have to imagine that this would have been all she wrote and this is over. I have to believe that with Vernell Brown being involved, it's worth remembering because sometimes we kind of forget with guys committing to places far away now. Recruiting's way less regional. Dallas Wilson's a Tampa kid.
Hmm.
He's right up the road from Gainesville, and being with Vernell Brown and his representation, I have a hard time believing, like I said, that doesn't play a big role here. I think Florida probably even after him signing, I think Florida and Vernell Brown probably kept in contact and just see if there was some type of Hail Mary they could throw. And it seems like they threw it and somebody came down with it.
Now, something to remember, I used to be pretty engrossed in this world covering recruiting. Not so much anymore, but I still have friends in pretty deep into it. My understanding of the Dallas Wilson thing, and again, I've heard this from other people, not from anybody directly affiliated with Wilson, is there was a real struggle with him and his family towards the very end. They love Oregon. They love everything about Oregon, but it's thousands of miles away. And Dallas Wilson's grandparents are very important to him. And Dallas Wilson's grandparents are not going to get on a plane and fly from Florida to Oregon every week.
Right.
Whereas if he's playing in Gainesville, they can make that drive or come with his parents or whomever. And I think Dallas Wilson was a very loyal guy, and he had been committed to Oregon forever. And he probably woke up on signing day and said, "Man, I love Oregon. I want to stick with it." And in the last 2 weeks, I think reality has sort of set in, knowing that he's about to head to Eugene for early enrollment. That, oh my God, this really is on the other side of the country. How are my grandparents and my family ever going to be able to see me play? And you mentioned the Vernell Brown tie, and all of that has just kind of weighed on this young man to the point where now I believe he has basically changed his mind and is trying to get out of that and go to Florida.
And you know what's interesting about that, Hack, and I think it's something that's worth mentioning in this conversation as a whole. If you take Dallas Wilson and make it more 10,000 feet, you just mentioned a couple different things that I absolutely agree with you had to have factored in big on his mind. And you never once mentioned money. And the
Right.
important part about that is, look, we all understand money is a big factor now. We all understand that NIL has completely changed recruiting. Transfer portal has completely changed recruiting. Transfer portal is just free agency now. And the top recruits in the country are going to get the best NIL deals. And, a lot of wealthy people tied to certain programs will make sure that happens and all that stuff. And we totally get that. However, I think sometimes we lose sight of other factors that still matter in recruiting. I mean, look, money certainly has to be a factor for a 5-star wide receiver such as Dallas Wilson. It has to be. But what you just said, traveling literally all the way across the country in the opposite corner of the country to Eugene, Oregon, instead of playing in Gainesville with grandparents that are probably a bit older, traveling all the time like that is probably pretty difficult on them. That matters. That still matters in recruiting. And I think, you look at the transfer portal with the Gators, like you look at, someone like Jack Pyburn, right? Like we've all talked about the money thing and all that, but like, look, playing on third down was, in my opinion, the number one reason that he's no longer a Gator. And I just think we have to be mindful of a lot of these other factors that still matter outside of just money. It's not like, yes, money matters and having a big pot of money to pull from to make sure you get the best guys. You obviously have to have that. I'm not saying this is the 90s anymore and in recruiting hasn't changed. I'm not trying to say that. I'm just trying to say that we have to remember that it's not always as simple as every recruit that comes to you because they love you and think it's the greatest thing ever, and every recruit that leaves is because, well, you just got outbid. It's not always that simple.
No, it's not always that simple. There's a lot more to it. And I hate to even go this route because, again, this recruitment of Dallas Wilson has been the ultimate roller coaster ride for so many people. But under the assumption that has indeed asked out of his letter of intent, he is planning on coming to Florida. Again, if that happens, we're going to go with that assumption right now. All of a sudden, Florida probably has the best wide receiver recruiting class in America. They would have if you look at 24/7, they would have 4 of the top 70 wide receivers that are going to end up in Gainesville. When you consider Vernell Brown, Nashawn Montgomery, the young man out of Texas who was the Arizona commit that is now at Florida, and if Dallas Wilson's in the mix. Rivals, I think, has Montgomery, Brown, and Wilson in like their top 25 or 30. So you would be getting 3 of the top like 30 in Rivals. So I know people are mad about the portal, and we'll get to that in a moment. But you want weapons for DJ Lagway. If Dallas Wilson comes to Florida, Billy Napier has probably secured the best wide receiver recruiting class in America, which I can't even begin to remember the last time that happened at the University of Florida.
I can't either. I mean, it's been far too long, Hack, that Florida, I mean, just fast forward a little bit and think about to these guys on the field. How not only has it been that long that they've had a wide receiver recruiting class like that, but just think about when you're watching games. When's the last time you saw a wide receiver room where you'd see guys catch a pass and they catch a slant or a crosser or whatever, and they just left their body in the dust and it looked like those DBs didn't belong on the same field?
Mm-hmm.
That used to be the norm in Gainesville, right? Dating back to Spurrier and Jaquez Green and Ike Hilliard and Reed L. Anthony and those boys, and then taking into the 2000s with Percy Harvin and Lewis Murphy and those types of dudes. Like, I mean, I think Antonio Callaway might be the last guy that was like truthfully like that on a regular basis, but even he was by himself and not on a very good team, and certainly not with an elite quarterback like DJ Lagway. So, and you have to, you're thinking of Moise Tonkara?
Yeah, the
The wide
Arizona
receiver from
commit that
Texas
flipped.
Arizona. Sorry, I was trying to find that name for us. Anyways, you factor this in with all this young talent at wide receiver. You factor it in with the fact that Eugene Wilson will be back, and he'll obviously be the ringleader in that room as the guy that's played a lot of snaps with Chim DK and Elijah Badger heading to the draft. And then you factor in, Hack, that they're bringing back the entire offensive line with the exception of Brandon Crenshaw Dixon at right tackle.
Right.
And who knows how they'll address right tackle. I tend to prefer and hope that they address it in the portal. I want somebody that's played a lot of college football, that's played, 2 years worth of snaps somewhere, that maybe got hurt or whatever, and that's why they're transferring, but can immediately be ready to rock. Although there's guys like Fletcher Westfall in the roster that have been developing, and maybe he ends up there. Who knows how they'll kind of address right tackle, but the rest of the line's all back. Austin Barber is back for his senior season. Najee Harris is back for his sophomore, junior season. Jake Slaughter, the best center in America, is back. That is huge, Hack. The best center in America is back. And then Damian George, obviously, was originally going to hit the portal. He's now not. You get continuity of the offensive line. You get all your backs, all your running backs back with the exception of Montrell Johnson. You have a guy who's going to be on Heisman lists at quarterback, and now you've got all these young receivers with talent. There's a lot of reason to be really, really excited about this Gator offense.
Yeah, there's absolutely no doubt about that. So that's the recruiting standpoint. Again, the Dallas Wilson news is the biggest news currently. Again, nothing's done yet, but we're recording this on Thursday. Apparently Tuesday is when he asked out of his letter of intent with Oregon. It's just now coming out on all the major websites, and the expectation, again, we've had that word a lot with Dallas Wilson, but the expectation is that if he is granted it, and many believe he will be granted it because that would be setting a bad precedent if you're Oregon to not grant him that, then Florida would be his destination. Now, to the portal, and you kind of alluded to it just then. On my timeline, on my show, Hacker After Dark, Graham, I'm sure you've seen it as well all over your social media. People were pissed about the transfer portal. And we'll get to the negative of that in a moment. Because there is some negative. I don't think it's as negative as people want to make it out to be, but there is some negative. The positive is what you just mentioned. If you're going to talk about this offseason for Florida, which, by the way, is only 19 days old. Just 19 days ago, they played Florida State at Doak Campbell Stadium. It's a pretty early offseason so far. They've already won the offseason, in my opinion, because they went out and they got the best offensive tackle, the best center, and the best defensive tackle they could have gotten. They didn't get him out of the portal, but they kept him with Caleb Banks, Austin Barber, and Jake Slaughter. I got news for you. You're not going to bring in a defensive tackle out of the portal that's as good as Caleb Banks. You thought he was leaving. He's coming back. That's just as good as an addition out of the portal, if not better. You're not going to get a center the caliber of Jake Slaughter, who many thought might leave. He's an All-American type player. He's back. And you probably weren't going to find a left tackle as good as Austin Barber in the portal. And there was some thought he could leave. He came back. So I know people were pissed about the portal, and we'll get to the negative in a moment. But Banks, Slaughter, Barber, and I'm personally of the opinion, and we don't know this yet because the one guy that has been announced is Tyreek Sapp. I'm connecting the dots with Pyburn and with Searcy going in the portal. Pyburn goes in the portal, Searcy goes in the portal. Do they have some sort of understanding that Tyreek Sapp is coming back? And if you get Sapp back as well to go with Banks, Slaughter, and Barber, that is a monumental win for Billy Napier this offseason.
I totally agree, and I tweeted about this the other day, exactly what you just said. There's no way that TJ Searcy and Jack Pyburn, two guys that presumably love being Gators, love being here, and it's not like they were the best players on the defense, but they did get playing time, they did get snaps, it's not like they were just bench warmers. There's no way those two guys leave without some sort of intelligence that Tyreek Sapp, the main guy at their position, the main dude that you expect to really rush the passer on third downs, is going to be back in orange and blue. I would, at this point, connecting the exact same dots you just did, I would be shocked if Tyreek Sapp is not on the team next year. Mm-hmm. To the portal point you made, I think you're absolutely right. And I think with retaining the guys that they did, and now, especially with adding Dallas Wilson in the receiver room, what they've now done, presumably, yes. What they've now done is when they walked off the field against Florida State, right after Mike Norvell had not allowed them to plant the flag, because not on his watch. They can lose by 20, but God forbid they plant a flag. Anyways, when they walked off the field on that day with all those guys up in the air, to your point, that are now going to be returning, they have flipped the narrative from we need multiple guys in the portal that are going to have to be some of the best players on the team to we just need to get guys in the portal for depth, right? When you bring Caleb Banks back, that's your difference maker on the interior of the defensive line. That's the guy on third downs that's going to really collapse the pocket. That's the guy that's going to help stuff the run on first and second down against run-heavy teams in the SEC. Now you just need to go find your Cam Jacksons, your Desmond Watsons. Those guys were good players, but they weren't Caleb Banks. You just need some bodies on that defensive line because you're going to be rotating a lot. You need dudes that can come in and give dudes like Caleb Banks a blow, and you'll be okay, and you're not going to get gashed. You just need depth. And depth these days, Hack, especially on defensive lines with the portal and the way it is really, really, really hard to come by. Even the best teams in the SEC are struggling with defensive line depth because, think like Georgia, for example. Like a guy that in the past would be a backup for Georgia just plays in rotational situations that is still a 4 or 5-star level talent and still could play in the NFL one day as a freshman or sophomore. That guy is now a starter at Missouri.
Yeah.
Instead of a backup at Georgia. So, it's not just Florida. Like every team struggles with some depth on the defensive line. That said, it's still a position they need to go get. They need to go get 1 or 2 bodies in the interior of that line. I would like them to find somebody at right tackle. And what do you think now? Again, presumably, if Dallas Wilson does come to fruition, would you still like to see a receiver in the portal?
Well, the thing is, all right, so who are the wide receivers on the team that have done anything in college football in 2025? Trey Wilson.
Eugene Wilson.
If he's back, if he's healthy. Mizell, to an extent, right? And Marcus Burke's back. Is he or is he gone?
I believe Marcus Burke was a senior.
Okay, was he a senior? All right, so then and you got there are only a couple other guys, but Mizell and because Andy Jean entered the portal and he really hadn't done anything anyway. So Trey Wilson and Mizell are really your only 2 guys that have done.
Apologies.
Much.
Burke was a redshirt junior, so I assume he'll probably be back then.
So Burke is back. So that does help. All right, so those are your 3 guys. And Burke hasn't done a lot, but he's done a little bit. So those are kind of your 3. Vernell Brown's going to play, and he's going to play a lot. Presumably Dallas Wilson's going to play, and he's going to play a lot. And again, I don't know this. I just go with what I've read and who I talk to. People are really high on this Nahshon Montgomery kid. People really like this Nahshon Montgomery kid. And I'm not going to say all 3 of those true freshmen are going to hit. Let's say one of them hits and one of them is adequate in their first year. Well, that gives you 4, maybe 5 options. So I think you probably need to go get 1 receiver out of the portal. I don't think you need 2 or 3. I think you probably need to go get 1, somebody that's done something. Whether that's a starter from a group of 5, whether that's a backup from a power 4, whether that's, I know Branch, the 5-star from USC, there's a lot of talk about him. Again, I'll believe that when I see it. But I probably think you need to go get 1 more at this point.
I would agree. Jax 904. I don't know if you can see that comment hack down below. Jax 904 says Dallas Wilson is better than anyone in the portal. I don't know about anyone in the portal, but
real quick, you got to pump the brakes because Dallas Wilson's 6'3", 200 pounds. People love him. People think he's a top 5 wide receiver in America. But look, you can catch 15 passes for 200 yards against, class 3A, Tampa Bay, whatever in the Tampa area. Playing Tennessee and LSU is a little different. We expect Dallas Wilson to be good, but how many 5-star wide receivers have we seen over the years that come in and do nothing? So I would just pump the brakes a little bit. I'd rather them have Dallas Wilson than not have Dallas Wilson. But there have been some good receivers in the portal. that have gone elsewhere that I would find it hard to believe are not as good, if not better, currently than Dallas Wilson. Keep going.
Yeah, yeah. What you the statement you had made right before this one is where I am as well. Before before this Dallas Wilson news, I would have said, or I had been saying, that I think Florida needs two receivers in the portal. Probably one guy that is maybe only a sophomore, has only been somewhere a year or two, but he was a really high level recruit. You still believe in his talent and having a high ceiling. And then probably another guy that's going to be a junior or senior that's played a ton of college football, caught a ton of balls, and he can be all reliable on 3rd and 4 to go get you 6, right? And Lagway knows where he's going to be, knows he's going to catch the ball. Chim DK kind of guy. Now I believe they just need the one dude that's ultra reliable. I totally agree with you. They just need a little experience added to the room. The talent is all there. The talent is and the potential is through the roof. But Eugene Wilson is one guy that's played a ton. To your point with Aiden Mizell and Marcus Burke, those guys have played, but it isn't like they've been your every down, always reliable type of dudes. They've kind of come and gone.
Well, let's remember one thing too about Eugene Wilson. That was a weird injury that he had. All right, it was like his hip, right?
Yeah.
You don't really know how you're going to respond to that. Let's hope he's 100%. Let's hope he's healthy. But let's keep in mind that for a collegiate athlete, particularly at a position like wide receiver, hip is not exactly probably an easy injury to come back 100% from right away.
Yeah, I would agree. I just think now, Hag, do you agree with me that they just need now one portal guy? I know you do because you said that one portal guy, but that guy needs to be someone that's played at least like 2+ years of college football, right? Do you agree
Yeah,
with that? It
yeah.
needs to be an upperclassman, has played a bunch, has played in big games, isn't going to get phased by big moments, that kind of dude.
Well, keep in mind too, it's happened 2 years in a row, and I'm not going to say it's going to happen a third year. Arguably, the biggest transfer portal guy 2 years ago at wide receiver was Keon Coleman. He went to Florida State in the other portal window, right? The spring portal window. Same thing with Badger, right? I'm not saying Badger was the best in the country, but Badger was pretty darn good for Florida last year. He was not in this portal window. He was in the spring portal window. So just because you don't land somebody now, you'd like to, but just because you don't land somebody now doesn't mean you won't land somebody in a couple of months.
Yeah, I totally agree. And, if you get that one guy that can be super reliable and you feel good about on an every down basis and can help you move the chains when need be, because I think that's something Lagway is going to need some help with, and I think that's the next step in his development is getting better on a down-to-down basis. We know how explosive he is. We know he can throw the deep ball. Once his hamstring is back healthy, we know he's an effective runner. He's great in the pocket. His next step as a quarterback is figuring out when to just take the profit and just get 5 yards, 6 yards. And that's going to help his completion percentage numbers, which were a little bit low once he gets that under his belt. And that's what somebody like a Chim DK, like I was saying, is going to help them do. Outside of that, man, I had been saying get 2 receivers in the portal, but now you look at how many bodies they have in that room. I mean, it's just simple math that there's going to be some odd men out here at this point. There's going to be some guys that at the end of probably next season, assuming health, there's going to be some guys when we look a year from now, we're going to talk about whoever that struggled to get on the field. I tend to believe that it might be a Marcus Burke type of guy that has been here for a long time, has never shown amazing flashes. He's shown some stuff here and there. But like we haven't even mentioned yet, like Tank Hawkins is still in that room. Like we've mentioned a lot of dudes, man, and there's only so many spots on the field. And Florida's also not a team that goes like empty 5 wide a lot either. There's typically at any given play for the Gators and the type of offense Billy Napier runs, there's only ever normally 3 to 4 receivers on the field. So, but that's a good problem to have, right? That's a good problem for Billy Gonzalez and Billy Napier to have to say, man, we've got kind of an embarrassment of riches here now, assuming all these guys show up and do pan out to be at least pretty good to great college players. And you see who your best 4 to 5 are, you rock with them, and you go score a bunch of points next year.
We got to go quick here because I want to get to the bowl game and basketball. But you got to remember, too, and I think we talked about this a couple weeks ago, it's because of the legacy, I think. At least that's my interpretation of it. I don't think people fully realize how good Vernell Brown is.
Yeah,
People were
I agree.
saying, well, he's Vernell Brown's son. Well, yeah, he is. He's also a 5-star wide receiver, considered to be one of the best top 10 wide receivers in America on 24/7 Sports. And if you get Dallas Wilson, too, like the news that broke this morning, 2 of the top 6 wide receivers in America, according to 24/7 Sports, are on their way to Gainesville, which is absolutely wild. Today's Gator Bytes podcast is brought to you by Southeast Orthopedic Specialists. For the highest quality care, you can rely on Southeast Orthopedic Specialists for any orthopedic injury or concern. You can go to their website, se-ortho.com, and you can listen for the good doctor Kevin Murphy Thursday mornings on The Drill with Jeff and Dan for his weekly analysis of injuries in the world of sports. Quickly to the game, because I want to end on basketball, Graham. They actually play a bowl game tomorrow. We're recording this on the 19th. They play Tulane on the 20th. It is what it is. I hate one of these games because if you win, you're supposed to. If you lose, it's kind of a big deal. Tulane's had all sorts of transfer portal issues. Their starting quarterback's not playing. Their 2 best defensive tackles aren't playing. Florida, on paper, should have a relatively easy time of this tomorrow. And if they don't, it would be somewhat of a surprise for me.
I agree. Tulane's they don't have a quarterback, and they're, they had a decent year, but it's kind of falling apart now, obviously. And it's basically a home game for the Gators down there in Tampa. Gators win. Gators win by what? 14, 17?
I would think so. 34-20,
If not more.
37-20, something
I
like
did
that.
hear Hayes Carline say on the Frangie show yesterday, which I do agree with. In a perfect world, this needs to be a game where DJ Lagway just goes crazy. And like stat line looks sexy at the end type of game. If they need to stat pad at the end a little bit, that's fine. Go ahead and do it. Nobody's going to remember in April that you stat padded late in the fourth quarter against Tulane, right? If there's an opportunity to get him an extra touchdown pass or whatever, go ahead and do it. Ideally, Florida gets to a point where they're running up the score a little bit late in the game, and please just get Lagway all those reps, all that experience, all that confidence. Give him everything you possibly can with this one last game, experience-wise, under his belt, and let's hit the ground running next year, man.
One of the things I'm excited about, too, is LJ McCray, because that's going to be one of your pie burn replacements. And I want to see the
Yep.
5-star from Daytona Beach, Maine, when now he's going to have more playing time, more snaps, because Pyburn and Searcy are gone. I'm really interested in seeing LJ McCray, not only tomorrow, but certainly moving forward. So the final Florida football game of the year against Tulane in Tampa, like you said, there should be a lot of Gator fans there, and I would expect Florida to win the game pretty easily.
I agree. Last thing I'll say on this, so we can move on, is just like DJ Lagway, LJ McCray, potentially Dallas Wilson coming in, Vernell Brown, these top recruits, dudes that everyone wanted. That is why Billy Napier is the coach and not Dan Mullen.
Yeah.
Right. Pretty plain and simple, right? So those DJ Lagway, we've already seen it, and we kind of know by now sky's the limit. LJ McCray, I'm glad you mentioned him. Like, it's time, baby, and I believe he will. But it's time to start looking like someone that's eating in the backfield and really starting to give offensive lines problems. And then next year you see with these receivers, and there's reason to be really excited about the talent they brought in.
Yeah, you start dreaming big. LJ McCray, George Gums, Caleb Banks, and potentially Tyreek Sapp on that defensive line in 2025. You could do an awful lot worse than that, no question. All right, basketball. Boy, that North Carolina game was really interesting. Look, Florida had already had a really good non-conference. When you have wins over Florida State, Wake Forest, Virginia, Arizona State, lump South Florida, Wichita State in there, good wins. They needed kind of that signature win. And even though North Carolina is maybe not the North Carolina we're used to, it's still North Carolina. It was still in Charlotte, which was basically a road game. And Florida had not faced basically any adversity the entire year. Just a little bit in Tallahassee at the very end. They had to make a big 3 with like 2 minutes to go to put the Seminoles away. But aside from that, very little adversity. North Carolina comes storming back, takes a 4-point lead with like 3 minutes to go. That entire building is going nuts in Charlotte. They need a signature win, the Tar Heels did. And for Florida to survive that and to come back and win in that fashion, whew, maybe the biggest win in the Todd Golden era. It was a huge, huge win.
It was huge. And I think, Hack, what's really important to take away from this team is in a moment like that, in that second half, what changed for Carolina was they put Ian Jackson in the game, who needs to be starting for them. As you might know, I like the Tar Heels, so I watch a lot of their games as well. I'm Gators number one always. But anyways, Ian Jackson, number 11, needs to be starting in place of Elliot Cadeau, who's a current starter in their backcourt. When he came in, he had 11 points in basically 20 minutes. It was cooking Florida in the second half, and that was a big problem for them. Defensively, they got some things to clean up. But to your point, everything's going against them in that second half, right? Florida's, oh my God, how do they blow this lead? And the crowd is going crazy, and Hubert Davis is going crazy, and
The ESPN commentators were going
the
crazy for
ESPN
North
commentators are
Carolina.
going crazy. The players can't hear it, but us
Yeah.
watching on TV can. And for them to pick themselves up off the mat, go get a couple of huge buckets, get to the line late in the game, which was so important, and get some huge boards at the end of the game. And that's what I think Gator fans need to be really, really excited about with this team. Like, look, a lot of teams can beat anybody on any given day in college basketball when they're shooting well and everything's going right. Right? I mean, Walter Clayton didn't play very well.
No, Clayton and Martin were combined 3 of 19 from three-point range.
Correct. And in that second half, the only way Florida was going to win that game at the end and pull it out was by making it a little bit of a street fight at the end. Scrappy, get extra rebounds. Thomas Houck coming in and just being scrappy and earning everything. Man, I love Thomas Houck.
Yeah. I love Will Richard. I mean, we're talking so much about Clayton and Martin. Boy, they won the game because of Will Richard.
That rebound that Richard got at the end where he put it back up was huge. That rebound and then the rebound Clayton earned. That's two of your best players. Will Richard had played well, but like with Clayton, that's your best player that's had a tough game, and he's busting his ass for that rebound at the end. That says a lot about the team, I think. And we talked about this last episode, I believe. Like Micah Hand-Lockton is medically redshirting this year. He's not going to play 1 minute all year. Nobody's got more energy on the sideline than that guy.
Yeah, he's pumped. Yeah.
He's playing. That speaks to the type of team Todd Golden's got. Man, every single dude on that team busts their ass for what they got, and that means something. Like I said, they got some stuff defensively they need to clean up a little bit. But the fact that they're willing to get dirty and get rebounds off the glass, get to the line, get fouled when they're not shooting super well and it's a little clunky, that makes me believe that even in games where they don't always play their best, they can still win. And that's the type of team that you feel good about in making a tournament run. Because you're not going to shoot 40% from three every game, right? But can you, when you're not playing well, can you still pull out those wins? Florida's proving they can.
11-0 for only the second time in program history. 4-0 against the ACC, right? Wins over Florida State, Wake Forest, Virginia, and North Carolina, which is pretty wild. They should be undefeated going into conference play. They will be gigantic favorites in their last two non-conference games. First of which is against UNF and the Ospreys, which I'm an alum of UNF. I hope they go down to Gainesville and perform well. I love Matthew Driscoll, but let's be honest. I mean, that's going to be a tough game for UNF. And then I think it's Stetson, right? Is the last one.
UNF beat South Carolina, though, to start the year.
And Georgia Tech. I mean, UNF beat Georgia Tech and South Carolina, so Florida's going to have to come ready to play, no question. But the Gators should be 13-0 going into conference play. The SEC is the best conference in America. I had Mark Wise on Hacker After Dark last week. Yeah, I don't know when this happened. It always means more on the gridiron, right? What obviously just means more now on the basketball hardwood. Because you're right, it's not even close. The SEC overwhelmingly is the best conference in America, and Florida's going to figure out pretty quick where they stand because they open up with Kentucky, and like Tennessee is one of their first games, Calipari and Arkansas.
Their first two SEC games are at Rupp Arena in Lexington, January 4th, and they come to Gainesville and play Tennessee January 7th against Tennessee, like I said.
And then I think they go to Fayetteville and play Calipari and the Razorbacks. So it is absolutely wild. I'm pumped the way Florida's playing right now. I'm ecstatic for the kids, Clayton and Elijah Martin's. You find me a better transfer in America right now than what Martin has done for the Gators. Absolutely phenomenal. But it's going to get tougher. It's going to get considerably tougher. And I think a game like the North Carolina game will really help Florida moving forward.
Yeah, they're not going to go. We know they're not going to go undefeated. Obviously, we get that. But look, man, they're like you said, they're probably going to go undefeated in non-conference play. So you're really giving yourself a nice leg up for what is inevitably going to be murderer's row across the SEC for every team because every team's good.
Yeah.
There's not one SEC college basketball team this year that's going to have an easy in-conference schedule.
Well, I mean, think about it like this: 13-0 in the non-conference. Let's say, I think they'll be better than this. Let's say they go 500 in conference play. You're 22-9. I mean, if you go 500 in conference play, you're probably looking at worst at a 5 or 6 seed in the tournament. At worst. And that's if you go 500 in the SEC, you're looking at a 5 or 6 seed. That's what going 13-0 in the non-conference means.
Correct.
It's a big deal. It's a big deal, no question. So Florida, UNF Saturday. Quickly, as we say goodbye. You like the Gators. Give me your 4 playoff wins. Give me the 4 teams that win round 1 of the playoffs this weekend.
Notre Dame beats Indiana. Ohio State beats Tennessee. Everybody's picking Tennessee to win that game. Ohio State wins that game. Who am I missing? Who are the 2 games I'm missing?
You got Texas, Clemson.
Yes, Texas wins that game.
SMU, Penn State.
That might be my upset.
Really?
I like SMU, dude. I think SMU is being underrated a little bit. Kevin Jennings is a beast, man. Kevin Jennings might be the best quarterback still left. That not on paper, but like playing right now.
They like to air it out. The problem is it's going to be bitter cold in Happy Valley. How will that affect
the upset I'll take
game?
this weekend. The other 3, I'm kind of going chalk.
All right, I like that. I'm curious to Tennessee. Have you seen the whole Tennessee takeover thing on social media? Apparently, the Volunteers. You don't think? Apparently, the Volunteers, they've gotten their hands on a lot of tickets in Columbus.
I mean,
I don't know how they got. What's that?
That's fine. Ohio State's still going to be overwhelming.
No, I'm not saying anything about the game. I'm just curious how Tennessee could get so many tickets in Columbus, Ohio for the first ever playoff game in Ohio State, on campus in history. That's wild to me. They're thinking 15,
I think that's more of a
000.
Twitter thing. I think when you actually watch the game in real life, it's not going to be that way.
We'll see. That's certainly the marquee game on Saturday night, Tennessee, Ohio State. Give me Notre Dame over Indiana. I'll take Penn State over SMU. Boy, nobody's picking Clemson. Nobody's giving Clemson a shot in that game against Texas. I thought about that one. Just save the tape. I thought about it. But give me Texas and Tennessee. Am I going to have my SEC blinders on and pick the Volunteers? Where is Ohio State mentally after that Texas game, after the Michigan game?
I think they're going to be pissed off and smelling blood.
Well, Ryan Day, all the pressure in the world. Ryan Day is going to get fired if he loses to Tennessee.
I agree. But the thing about Ryan Day is he can't beat Michigan, but nobody else can beat him.
Yeah. Ohio State hasn't seen an offense like Tennessee this year, except Oregon, and they lost that game.
Yeah, they lost by 1 on the road. Though if that game's in the shoe, I think they win. And this game is in the shoe, so.
I'm tempted to take Tennessee. In fact, I'm going to do it. I am going to take Tennessee. Call me an SEC homer, but give me Tennessee, give me Notre Dame, give me Penn State, and give me Texas. Graham, have a terrific Christmas. Happy holidays. Always enjoy doing this with you, man. And we'll be back probably the week of New Year's, and we'll kind of recap the bowl game, recap everything with the Dallas Wilson situation. We'll preview SEC basketball conference play.
Yes, sir.
That is Graham Marsh. I'm the hacker Ryan Green. Thank you to Southeast Orthopedic Specialists. Go to se-ortho.com. Southeast Orthopedic Specialists brings you Gator Bytes right here on the 1010XL Podcast Network and on the Florida Gator 1010XL Facebook page.